Hello, friends of Studio Brule. This is Steve Brule, and it is coffee time, where I go over some of the stuff that's come across my desk since the last coffee break. And I have my VIP club member of the patriarchy on display, authorizing me to comment on the comings and goings of the evil feminist empire that has its thousands of tentacles spread all around the world. I have to apologize for not having Janice Fiamengo on today as planned. Something came up for Janice, and we had to postpone this, so she'll be back on next Friday, a week from today. And so what I'm going to talk about today is some stuff that we predicted from the beginning of this lockdown. And that lockdown, from the beginning here, I predicted that this coronavirus would be solved within a few weeks or a month or two after the US election. And so we're going to talk about that, and miraculously, yes, about 1 week after the election, faster than I thought, because they're bolder than I thought, and they know that the public memory is shorter than ever. So they didn't have to wait very long for us for people to forget just what the big plan was. So we have a coronavirus vaccines coming. We'll get into that pretty much right away. So let me get right to the meat of the material here. This item, this is a little warm-up for it, and part of the discussion today is to highlight just how incredibly overpowering the left has taken over our culture. The left has really, without even an election, the left has creeped in through the education system and taken over virtually every pillar of our society. So we're going to see a little bit of that today. And welcome to Horror Cocktail and Bill Jones. Now, this came up in a discourse. A medical student was expelled for refusing to change his personal beliefs. And this is by Barbara Kay. This goes back, I think, about to just before the election. It might be 1 or 2 weeks ago that Barbara Kay printed this out. And I definitely wanted to highlight it here because it does show the direction and the influence of the woke totalitarians in our culture that have seized power of our institutions. Let's read this from the top. Zaki's troubles began. Zaki is the fellow who was expelled from medical school, and he is an immigrant from, I'm going to get it wrong, I can't remember which country, but he left his country, his family left his country because of their being persecuted for their views as Coptic Christians. And here they come to Canada and are persecuted for their views as Christians again. So Zaki's trouble began in February 2019 when 18 anonymous complaints were filed against him, citing a few pro-life and pro-gun rights posts. The former, a long essay he had written for his Sunday school on his Facebook page. The anonymous complaint said the posts made them feel unsafe. Unsafe. That's like accusing somebody of being a witch kind of thing, casting spells. You made them feel unsafe. Making somebody feel unsafe with words is no different than a witch casting spells and being burned at the stake for it, but that's the way it is in universities today. You made somebody feel unsafe. An investigation was launched, which led directly to a remediation process during which Zaki was summoned to 7 meetings with Dr. Ira Ripstein. Ira Ripstein is one of these authoritarian woke priestesses who happens to run the medical school. That's how deep it is, folks. Nobody gets into a position of power in the universities without being fully woke and fully indoctrinated. And this is the result. The Max Rady College of Medicine, Associate Dean for Undergraduate Medical Education. The wokenesses have taken over the culture. Let's read on. These meetings produced 10 written apologies by Zaki. 10 apologies. This reminds me of why you never apologize, because they just want to humiliate you and then they get rid of you anyway. Don't apologize, ever. Written by Zaki, urged on him by Dr. Ripstein, the wokeness tyrant, as a way of avoiding disciplinary action. 5 to his fellow students, and 5 to the faculty for having caused offense through statement of his opinions. He caused offense through straight statement of his opinions. He pulled them from Facebook within 18 hours of the allegations. But this guy's life was turned upside down. I think he's still fighting it in court, but I don't feel very positive for his chances, because this is Canada, Canuckistan, where Emperor Trudeau is forcing wokeness throughout the culture. Let's read on. Even then, Dr. Ripstein continued to side with students who claimed to feel unsafe with Zaki. The feeling of unsafe. This is just like the feeling of children. I feel I'm next to a witch. I'm twitching, therefore we must burn the witch. According to Dr. Ripstein, the apologies were insufficiently remorseful and sincere, as they did not include testimony to a change in his beliefs. Indeed, they did not contain evidence of a change in his beliefs because Zaki had not experienced a change in his beliefs. He continues to believe in the right to own arms. He continues to believe abortion is a moral crime. Well, I'm certainly on board with the right to own arms. And though my view on abortion is much more nuanced than that, but I'm not going to get into that. But he has every right to his beliefs. And if he doesn't, then we don't live in a free society. So what do you guys think kind of society we live in? It's not free. The woke warriors have taken over all the administrative positions in every pillar and every industry in our culture. Wokeness has been enforced upon us without due process, without election, and it hardly matters who the elected officials are, folks, because when the population gets brainwashed into wokeness, they vote in a woke leader. That's why we have Prime Minister Woke Child Emperor Trudeau in Canada. This is how it's happening. This slippery slope's been going on a long time, folks, and I know I get a little bit pessimistic when discussing this, because I think we've passed the point of no return. We're heading toward a socialist one world government, one way or the other. We're going to have to live through it. And that was the topic of my talk at the 21 convention. I highly recommend you have a look at that for my thoughts on that if you're interested. But I'm optimistic in the longer term. I think that ultimately this one world government, socialist, woke, feminist movement is going to go down in history as the worst human rights period in the history of humanity. It's going to be tyrannical and terrible, but it will collapse one day. And that's the day I feel hopeful about. But I think we have to go through it because they have infected. The patient has been infected with a overwhelmingly powerful disease, and he's going to have to go through treatment. And the treatment ain't going to be pretty. So let's carry on here. A little more read from this article by Barbara Kay. Well worth reading the whole article. According to Zaki, Dr. Ripstein said that because Zaki holds a belief in the right to bear arms and the right to life, quote, this is quoting Ripstein, Zaki is saying, the Ripstein suggests, I must support shooting up abortion clinics, support rape at gunpoint, and support shooting those of a higher socioeconomic status, unquote. To all of these suggestions, Zaki says he voiced a horrified no. Zaki says he was also accused of being homophobic, transphobic, and racist, all without any evidence. That, in a nutshell, folks, is the effect of wokeness. It's a brain infection, and it's infected the majority of our culture. It's infected all of the people who administrate our culture. The administrators at universities, the administrators in public service, in working for the government, the civil service. They've infected the administration at global corporations. They've infected the church. They've infected the police system. It's right through our culture, top to bottom. Let's read on here in the second paragraph. This is shocking behavior if true, suggesting a revulsion for Zaki's views so extreme it erupted into hatefulness toward the holder of the views. Hateful is not too strong a word to describe a prosecutor who attempts to elicit confessions of thought crimes that will brand the accused not only as someone with incorrect opinions, but as an enemy of the people. You know, we could have lifted that paragraph straight out of Orwell's book, or it could be put right into Orwell's book, and it would fit right in. This is where we're at. I hate being the bearer of bad news. I think I lose a lot of subscribers for being pessimistic. But, I mean, I can't ignore what's right in front of my eyes. The woke warriors have overwhelmed Western culture, and they've placed their mind virus in the overwhelming majority of regular people. The majority of people in the Western world are ideologically possessed. They will go right on board with this. If they weren't, this guy would not have been kicked out of university. That's how bad it is, folks. Let's read on. Suppression of politically incorrect opinions by university authorities is nothing new. True, but it's fairly recent. Demand to withdraw allegedly offensive speech from public circulation is not new. True also, but it is a recent development. This is the slippery slope we're talking about. Compelled speech, as in diversity, equity, and inclusion statements on academic grant applications, for example, is also not new. True, it's just one further meter down the slippery slope. But let's read the second paragraph. But a demand that an accused person must actually change or declare against his will that he has changed his private, non-hateful beliefs as a condition for readmittance to institutional standing. It seems to me we are in very ugly new territory here. Yes, we are in the territory of George Orwell. Predicted all of this. In authoritarian regimes, they only ask for your political obedience. In Zaki's case, the apologies for giving offense with a promise to keep his opinions to himself hereafter would have sufficed. It is in totalitarian regimes in which every aspect of life, including your private thoughts, is considered political, that they demand your very soul. And that is what has happened here. That is it, folks. That is exactly what's happened here. And every year or every month, we see a new, more extreme example of wokeness being pushed, demanded, and forced upon us. I'm tempted to think, I've stopped thinking this way, but I used to think, well, this has got to be the peak. It's as bad as it can get. It can't get worse from here. People will wake up and rebel. But no, they don't, especially in Canada. Canadians will always go along with the next edict. Follow that slippery slope all the way down. Maybe they're accustomed to that by tobogganing on snow hills, always looking to go as fast as possible to the bottom of the hill, because that's what we're doing right now. We're heading as fast as possible to the bottom of the hill. Canada is leading the way. And don't fool yourself. Every Western country is following this path, including the United States of America. The one main difference with the US is that they have gun rights. When sufficient numbers of them get sufficiently upset and fed up, they can use those gun rights. Not in Canada. Let's carry on. And then there is this, which ought to make the College of Medicine, and in fact the University of Manitoba, hang their heads in shame. But it don't, and it won't, because they will lift their heads with pride of having protected people from feeling unsafe. And that, whatever that means. Quote, already my parents and I have had discussions about whether Canada values us. This is the young man, Zaki. Friends from church have also talked to me about whether Canada is still a safe country for Coptic believers. It would be tragic if Coptic believers, having been pushed out of the Middle East for having non-approved beliefs, are also pushed out of Canada for having non-approved beliefs. That is exactly what happens, and that's what's happening. Wokeness, the feminist woke warriors, they are the tyrants. They're on every street corner, they're in every home, they're in every apartment building and every job and every university campus and school. They have taken over. This mind virus has taken over the Western culture. Now let's read on. This is from Quillette, and this is well worth reading the entire thing here. This was written in a kind of a joking manner. This is from last January. You could probably add a few terms here. Let's read the title. An Orwell lexicon for bias and dysfunction in psychology and academia. This should apply right throughout our culture, and I'll bet you could come up with a whole bunch more words to define what's really going on here. Let's have a look at a couple of what they've printed here. It's from Lee Jewson. Adminomania, a delusion that increased administrative and bureaucratic intrusions into people's lives will actually improve something, fueled primarily by a pervasive blindness to unintended negative side effects. See Title IX. Here, athletic gynocide, or genocide, the elimination from sports competitions of people identified at birth by doctors or other adults as female because they cannot successfully compete with people identified at birth by doctors or other adults as males, but who identify as females. Yep. Bias. I love this one. A bias for seeing biases. This is feminism through and through. Often manifesting as either claiming bias where none exists, exaggerating biases that do exist, or overgeneralizing to large swaths of life from studies finding bias in some narrow or specific context. Yep. Brophobia, this is a great one, and this is all over the place. Fear of men having a conversation among themselves. Brophobia. I'm going to remember this one. Brophobia. We've seen this one for almost a decade now, with the universities furious and hysterically against men's groups from forming. Any men's group on any campus in Canada that I know of, they've faced fierce opposition, and many were not allowed to be certified by their student bodies. This is brophobia, the fear of men having a conversation among themselves. That means without female supervision. That's feminism. Feminism is absolutely terrified that men will get together away from their prying eyes and have conversations that have nothing to do with feminists. Or maybe they do have to do with feminists, but who cares? It should be none of their friggin' business. Let's read another word here. Genotophobia. Fear of genetic explanations for human behaviors, competencies, traits, and preferences, often manifests as blank slatism and environmental determinism. Fear of genetic explanations. Wow, that one is everywhere in feminism. As you notice, most of this lexicon, we're calling it a Orwellian lexicon, it really applies almost exclusively and pervasively to woke feminists, or feminists in general, because all of it is displayed in feminism. Heterophobia, fear of and prejudice against heterosexual men and women. Wow, they have that in spades. Identity colonialism. This is a great way to turn their wording against them. But then feminists have absolutely zero capacity for introspection. They will not see this at all. Identity colonialism, the assumption that you have a better grasp of what's harmful to a marginalized group than members of that group. Isn't that wonderful? That is exactly identifying feminism. Okay, so this is, I think, from Daily Mail UK. I'm going to read this, and we're going to get into the coronavirus stuff now and the miraculous appearance of a vaccine. Miraculously, exactly after the election, miraculously as we predicted 7 months ago or more. This is a hallmark or an earmark or an identifier of a scam when it is totally predictable. We all predicted that 7 months ago that after the election, there would suddenly be a cure for coronavirus. But let's get into this. Reading from the top. We must not slacken, Boris Johnson warns Britons to stick to the rules to get through second wave as he hails COVID vaccine breakthrough that could get life back to normal by spring, and reveals UK has ordered enough for a third of the population. I can tell you guys right off the bat here, right? You guys aren't going to be surprised at this. I am not taking that vaccine voluntarily. Not a chance on earth. This is the biggest scam in medical history, the biggest scam in human history, possibly. When you look at it in combination with their obsessive desire to get rid of Trump and to usher in a one world government. There's no way I'm going to go down and get this vaccine injected into me. And I'm not anti-vaxxer. I've taken vaccines in the past. And I'll take vaccines in the future when it seems to be warranted for true health concern. This is not. These vaccines, well, don't want to jump too far ahead. Let's carry on with this. This is from Mail Online, this last article. And this is the fellow here who wrote it, published November 9th, 6 days after the election, after they've declared, prematurely declared Biden to be the victor. Let's carry on here. Just read this little bit because that's all I'm going to quote out of this article. Boris Johnson has called on Britain to stick to get through the second wave. Oh, I think we already read that in the headline. Massive breakthrough in the vaccine. Yeah. How come it's so predictable? Shouldn't we know? Shouldn't we? Why should we think this is so predictable? Let's. I want to just put this quote up here. I read this and I forgot to quote this, but yes, Renovatio says that on the very day the vaccine was announced, the CEO of Pfizer dumped 62% of his stock. That is interesting. Now, you could read that a lot of ways, but it certainly means that there's a correlation here. There's certainly a correlation. Why would the CEO dump 62% of the stock on the very same day? Maybe the announcement maybe the stock went up abruptly as he knew it would from that announcement, and he doesn't have confidence in his own vaccine. I don't know. There could be a lot of other reasons, I suppose. But it is interesting. Now, I'll read this one quote out of that Mail Online article. Supporters of Donald Trump questioned the timing of the announcement. Less than a week after the knife-edge election delivered victory to Joe Biden. Well, it's still a contested victory, but in any case, Mr. Trump, who is still contesting the outcome, tweeted that it was great news. And here, coronavirus vaccine tracker, and the links for these sites are in the description of the video. Here it shows that there's vaccines approved for early or limited use. There are 6 of them out there, none approved as of yet. And this was published November 11th. Again, what is that? 7 days, 8 days after the election? Reading from the top. This is from Pfizer's website, I believe. Well, don't quote me on that. I can't remember, but you see the link in the description. Pfizer and biotech vaccines, like almost all the other in clinical trial, requires 2 doses. In summer, the companies began inking deals to deliver large orders to countries around the world. The Trump administration awarded almost $2 billion contract in July for 100 million doses to be delivered by December, and the option to acquire 500 million more doses. Meanwhile, Japan made a deal for 120 million doses, and the European Union arranged to purchase 200 million doses. If their vaccine is authorized, Pfizer and BioNTech expect to manufacture over 1.3 billion doses of their vaccine worldwide by the end of 2021. Now, right in there, the sale to governments. These are these are not sales to individuals. These are sales to governments. They're almost guaranteed when the governments are controlled by the very companies, or at least the lobbying is so strong that government compliance is almost assured around the world. These companies knew that if they could hype up the coronavirus and keep it live, keep people frightened to death, that the people would demand their government to buy these viruses. So these corporations, this is a done deal. They can rush anything out there and claim almost anything, and they've got pre-sales of $1.3 billion. Let's just guess how much each dose is going to cost. Let me just guess $50. Okay. So right there at $50, you're talking about $80 billion. $80 billion for one company on one product. That's a motive to make sure that people are scared to death of coronavirus, even though there's nothing to be afraid of. Nothing to be afraid of. Reading this headline here. Pfizer and BioNTech announced vaccine candidate against COVID-19 achieved success in first interim analysis from phase 3 study, November 9th, 6 days after the election. And here, scientists behind BioNTech Pfizer vaccine says it can end pandemic. What's the date? November 12th, 8 days after the vaccine. Reading a quote from this. 8 days after the election, I should say. The scientist behind the first COVID-19 vaccine to clear interim clinical trial says he is confident his product can, quote, bash the virus over the head and put an end to the pandemic that has held the world hostage in 2020. Okay, let's just unpack that, to use wokey dokey words. I don't like borrowing their words, but let's unpack it anyways. The pandemic has not held the world hostage, folks. The pandemic has not done anything to people other than shifted some deaths, mostly by definition. Most of the deaths were comorbidities. We all know that. The exaggeration of mortality rate to COVID-19 is over the top. The survival rate for the bulk of the population is in the 99.9 something percent. What has held the world hostage are the world's leaders, the government. And the governments are acting on behalf of the global corporations who want everybody to be afraid in order that they sell their virus and help to usher in this leftist one world government. The pandemic has not held anybody hostage. The government has. The world leaders have been holding all of us hostage. They are the tyrants, not the pandemic. It's ridiculous, and it makes me mad to see people pushing this crap like the pandemic held anybody hostage. The pandemic, the COVID-19, has held nobody hostage. We should be attacking our leaders for pushing this on us. But no, the Western world, the mentality has turned to sheepiness. Let's read on. The German company BioNTech and the U.S. pharmaceutical plant giant Pfizer announced via press release on Monday that their jointly developed vaccine candidate had outperformed expectations in the crucial phase 3 trials, proving 90% effective in stopping people from falling ill. 90% effective. That is what they call exceeding their expectations. So in other words, this virus, this vaccine is enormously less effective, 90% effective against a disease. Let me just rephrase this. It is 90% effective against a disease in which 99.99% of the people have no illness from. No illness. Who is it going to protect? It's proving only 90% effective in protecting people who have absolutely no risk of getting sick without the disease, without the vaccine. I mean, let's make that clear. I know I'm kind of belaboring this point here, but they're claiming 90% effective when the general population is already 99.9 something percent immune. Your natural immunity is way more effective than this vaccine is. What exactly is it protecting? It's nothing. It's just more scam words. Scamdemic. Incredible. And this from Spiked magazine. And this really highlights exactly who is pulling all the strings around not only this scamdemic, but this election with Trump and these horrible carryings on we saw about at the universities, kicking students out for having wrong think. Who's behind all this stuff? This really shows it in Spiked magazine. This is printed in November 11th. Let's read from the top. Britain's political police state, and it's not restricted to Britain. This is going on all around the Western world. Extinction Rebellion activists have protested at the cenotaph days after police prevented veterans paying tribute there. That really speaks volumes, folks. Extinction Rebellion is a far left environmental activist group. Let's have a look at what they say in Spiked article here. I highly recommend you read all these articles. None of them are terribly long, and they have a lot more information in them, but I'm going to just give you a taste of this. In the UK, authoritarian lockdown rules mean it is currently illegal to gather outside with more than one person from another household. Wow, that is as authoritarian as it's ever been. I wonder if any of the most extreme authoritarian states, dictators, ever enforced such an extreme lockdown at their worst of times. Illegal to gather outside with more than one person. What are they afraid of? They're afraid of people getting together, talking, or organizing, and taking them out of power by force if necessary, these frickin' tyrants. Because that's what should be happening. Reading from the top. Accordingly, this year's Remembrance Sunday service at the cenotaph was scaled back, with the event closed to the public for the first time. People were discouraged from gathering not only at the monument, but also at public commemorations across the country. Many people were denied the ability to pay tribute publicly to fallen soldiers in their usual way. It's cuckland all across the Western world, Harry. The whole Western world has turned into cuckland. This is the result of 50 or 60 years of non-stop feminist browbeating and men retreating and retreating and retreating until there's nowhere to retreat to anymore. You can't even retreat into your own mind, as we found out with that young fella, Zaki, at the University of Manitoba Medical School. There's no further place to retreat to, folks. And yet today, on Remembrance Day, Extinction Rebellion protesters rocked up and placed, I don't know what rocked up means, placed a wreath on the cenotaph with the words "Climate change means war and act now" on it. They also unfurled a banner with a similar message: honor their sacrifice, climate change means war. And if you recall, I made the point some months ago, the climate change is the same as the coronavirus. Both issues are designed to make people so frightened that they will give up as much power as they can, anything asked for by the authorities and the government. That's the purpose of the constant fear-mongering of climate change and the constant fear-mongering of the coronavirus lockdown. We've had this climate change fear-mongering in our face for decades. And what the authorities know is that the public is not getting sufficiently afraid. It hasn't worked. And they saw the coronavirus as an opportunity to really make them afraid. And we see the response with the Great Reset being claimed as necessary to solve what? Both the coronavirus and the climate crisis. They're connected. And it's the same people pushing for the same response to the same global so-called crisis, of which they are both fantasies. Both of these crises are fantasies designed to keep you afraid, designed to motivate masses of people from giving up their liberties, their freedoms, and becoming slaves to the state, slaves to the elite. Let's read on here. There is much to be said against the protest itself, which was deeply distasteful and will probably turn out to be yet another PR disaster for the hapless XR, that's Extinction Rebellion. But more concerning is what this tells us about Britain's COVID police state. It tells us that the leftists dominate, and they have the sympathy and support of the police. They have the sympathy and support of their elected officials and administrators in every institution of our society. Reading from the top. It seems that the police treat protesters differently according to the cause they support. Last week, police took a zero-tolerance approach to anti-lockdown protesters, making over 100 arrests. Back in August, lockdown skeptic Piers Corbyn was handed a £10,000 fine for organizing a protest. But not all protesters are punished. In June, when Black Lives Matter protesters broke the lockdown, police supported the protests by taking a knee in front of them. Can we see the pattern here, folks? All of the pillars of our society are taking a knee. They're all backing up the leftists, giving them a wide berth to do whatever they want, and clamping down on anybody who objects. If you object to the lockdown, they'll clamp down on you. They'll arrest you. They'll saddle you with crippling fines. If you protest to anything about the coronavirus, if you protest to climate change, the climate change critics, or rather the climate change enthusiasts, they'll arrest you too. They'll block you. This is leftism. They've taken over without being elected. And they've been at it for 50, 60 years or more. Let's read from the top. As radio presenter Alex Belfield has pointed out, Extinction Rebellion were able to protest at the cenotaph on Remembrance Day, despite the fact that police lines prevented veterans accessing it on Remembrance Sunday. Just let that sink in. The veterans can't go to their own monument. But Extinction Rebellion can get there on the basis of a climate change protest. Apparently it is fine to head to the cenotaph if you want to make a statement about environment, but not if you want to commemorate the past. Incredible. And here they are. Here are your Extinction Rebellion people. Walking right up there, unimpeded, no arrests, no fines, no police to stop them. Now let's get here. Have a look at this. I put this up here. This was published in February 19th because I want to remind you guys just what's at play here and has been at play all year. February 19th. That was before the coronavirus lockdowns, coronavirus quarantines, and all the rest of that stuff. Washington Post slammed changes headlined after op-ed calls for elites to have a bigger say in choosing the president. This is the sentiment of the left. The left are about the elites. They're about giving up power, having the elites have absolute power over everything in your life. That thought crime of the young man there is just a taste of the future. The headline on the Washington Post, which originally read, "It's time to give the elites a bigger say in choosing the president," was changed to "It's time to switch to preference primaries," without any editor's note after the op-ed was blasted on social media. And yet, remember, I like to remind people this, you guys remember this for sure. The Democrats have been saying they were going to get rid of Trump one way or another. They used words like whatever it takes. Nothing is off the table. The Democrats are lying thieves. They want absolute power as elites. They are the elites. They're lying, scheming thieves. When they said they want Trump out of power and they will get Trump out of power no matter what it takes, nothing is off the table, bar anything, they were already planning to steal the election. And here's the problem, why they will likely succeed in stealing the election. There was I forgot to link it, but there was a great article on how cautious the Supreme Court actually has to be in this and may not step in. And because it's very risky for the Supreme Court to invalidate an election. And there's a time limit to it. All they had to do is make their illegal election interference complicated, vast, and filled with different forms of cheating, and it would be impossible to get the evidence together and get it through the courts before time runs out. It's not like the feminists, their charge of rape now. You can go back to a rape charge from 45 years ago without evidence and it will be heard in court. Trump has a matter of weeks to prove a complicated case sufficiently enough proven in court to overturn the cheated districts. That is an enormous, enormous barrier right there. The Democrats know that. That's why they were so boldly cheating. You have to prove this in 5 or 6 different jurisdictions. I'm glad that that Trump is contesting the election, as he very well should. But even though I think he's right, it was stolen, I don't think he can prove it in a court in sufficient number of jurisdictions to overturn the result of the election. Therefore, as usual, the organized criminals have won. And the Democratic Party is the party of the thieves and lying organized criminals, and they want to take over and usher in a socialist world where we are slaves and they rule over us with absolute power. Let's read on here. And here is another one. You may have seen this. This came out November 4th. And this also speaks to how pervasive wokeness is in our culture, how thorough this mind virus has taken over the young. Of course it has. The mind virus spreaders, the creators of the mind virus, have taken over the education system. Read this: An American beckons with racial injustice. A new Hippocratic oath asks doctors to fight racial injustice and misinformation. The doctors now are woke warriors. Walk into your doctor's office. First of all, if that doctor is under 45, I'd walk right back out and go look for a new doctor. You walk into a young doctor's office today, they see you as a white man. I don't think they're going to give you proper attention. I'm not going to one. Here, the picture of the doctors. These are first-year medical students, and they have their fist up in the Black Lives Matter con. Black Lives Matter is an enormous con, and this is really disheartening because it shows how stupid and gullible and susceptible to cons that the young people today are, or most of our culture is. Black Lives Matter is a con group. It is a feminist group. It is not a black group. And all of their victims, their so-called victims, were actually criminals, virtually. But it doesn't seem to matter to any of these small-minded little people here who are now taking over our culture. Let's read from the top. First-year medical student Sean Sweat, quote, didn't want to tiptoe around issues of race when she sat down with 11 of her classmates to write a new version of the medical profession's venerable Hippocratic oath. Yeah, well, the medical profession is filled with woke warriors now. We start our medical journey amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. Oh my God. Oh my God. How brain dead can you be? And these are going to be your doctors. And a national civil rights movement reinvigorated by the killings of Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and Ahmaud Arbery begins the alternate version of the oath. rewritten for the class of 2024 at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine. Woke warriors. So much for treating every patient as an individual. Nope, everything is about woke warriorness. Now, as I was finished getting this last minute presentation together, I saw this comment on Studio Brûlé on against one of the on one of my interview at the 21 convention, and I'll read it out to you. And this is the Hub Man says, perhaps you could comment on this issue. Go to Massachusetts Democrats. That's there. The websites there you can see, and have a look at their content. BLM is featured prominently on their homepage. Has the Mass Dems become a chapter of BLM now? When a so-called political party suddenly endorses SJW causes with this level of importance, I start to question who is really running the Mass Dems. Well, there's no question about it. The Mass Dems, and thank you for this, the Hubman, I did go to their website. The Democrats are the party of Antifa. They're the party of Black Lives Matter. They're the socialists. And I feel they're better named as the Feminist Party of the U.S. The Democrats are really the feminist party of the United States. So yes, they are fully Black Lives Matter. They are socialists. They want to sell the U.S. to the globalists. Here is the Mass Dems, Massachusetts Democrats webpage, and the links will be in the description. I didn't get that one in just yet. It's time to mobilize Massachusetts, they say. And here is the Black Lives Matter statement. Let's have a look at that. If you can read that with me. The Massachusetts Democratic Party stands with Black and Brown communities here and everywhere in their call for justice and accountability, and in their demand to end racism, inequality, and brutality. In this fight against racism and discrimination and for opportunity and accountability, we will do what is in our power to support and elect Democratic candidates up and down the ticket who vow to embrace an anti-racist, anti-xenophobic platform, and who support the kind of reforms that will disrupt age-old systems, structures, cultures, and practices that have propped up the racist treatment of the Black and Brown people in the state and country throughout history. That is a statement worded, you can see the wording in there, very recognizable as feminist type wording. Both parties are against racism, are anti-xenophobic. Both parties are, but the reality is that Black Lives Matter is a racist group. It is a racist, bigoted, feminist group. They openly disdain Black men themselves while using them to promote their cause. Folks, we may well have a Democrat, in other words, a feminist president of the U.S. if Biden gets in. I think it's going to be it's a long shot for Trump to be able to prove that the election was stolen. So we're going to have to face a thief in chief. You can quote me on that. Let's call him thief in chief, a feminist U.S. president. But as I've been saying all along, even the election of Trump is not going to stop the steamrolling in of a one world government. Have a look at my talk on from the 21 convention, in which I discuss the inevitability of the rising one world government and what we can do about it. Trump's election would have been just a delay. These people are massively powerful. They have the majority of the public with the mind virus. You see it in and their operatives, their foot soldiers are in every administrative position throughout our culture, in every pillar of our culture. This was an anti-democratic takeover by the feminists starting in the 1970s, getting into the university systems. This is also from the Massachusetts Democrats. The murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Tony McQuaid, Javier Hambler, and countless others are not isolated or uncommon. They're also not murders. They were killed in the line of police duty. Perhaps George Floyd, I don't know where that case is. Maybe he will be concluded as having been murdered by police brutality. Most of the others were not. These are tragedies resulting from a long history of institutional racism and violence against Black Americans. Well, all of those people killed were actually committing crimes. So it's, I kind of shake my head at this stuff. This is just, I mean, how many times can we prove this? They've repeated this enough that the majority of the public believe that that the police are targeting Black Americans in the U.S. Read this last sentence. As long as Black communities live in fear of those who claim to protect and serve, we have failed. This is from the Democratic Party of Massachusetts. Look, this is the trick of these propagandists. They just keep repeating it over and over and over again. It's like the evidence pouring out about the theft in the election, the election fraud, the evidence pouring out. Every time more evidence pours out and so blatant and obvious, all the Democrats and the leftists say is, there is no proof of evidence. There's no evidence of election fraud. They'll just repeat it over and over and over again. They'll repeat it in headlines. BBC was caught doing that very early on, that that authorities have shown that there's no evidence of fraud. And just in the same day, evidence of fraud is being produced rapidly in multiple jurisdictions, and yet the BBC proudly puts their headline out there, there is no evidence of fraud. And who do you think all the public who are infected with the mind virus of feminism believe? They believe BBC, they believe CNN, they believe CBC in Canada. I've seen way too many examples of the deceit and clear deliberate deceit from CBC in Canada to ever believe anything that they say again. And that goes for all of those leftist journals. These are propaganda outlets. They're nothing more than propaganda outlets. So, to wrap up today, folks, I want to remind you that the International Convention on Men's Issues 2020, which is organized by Mike Buchanan, and I think it's Fathers for Justice, or Justice for Men and Boys, in the UK is organizing. It's an online conference this year. The website, I'll put that in the description of the video. And there is 120 lectures from quite a few different speakers today, or this year, I should say. And they are going to go up one after the other on the website at the ICMI 2020, which I'll put up. I'll put the website right in here right now for you in case you don't want to go to the description of the video. I'm putting the ICMI page in the comments. And here is the list of speakers and their schedule. The links in the two links in the comments here. Do have a look. There's the regulars, people, well-known names you'll know. Warren Farrell will be speaking, Janice Fiamengo, Karen Strawn, Mike Buchanan is giving a lecture, and I'm giving a lecture as well. It's uploaded and it'll be on Sunday. Let's just have a look here. The title of my lecture is Husband 2.0, Alternatives to Indentured Servitude. And I get into two specific alternatives that might appeal to different men with different temperaments to protect yourself. The idea of my lecture is that a man should not have to forego his natural drives and suppress his natural drives for reproduction, even in this time where marriage has become a unacceptable risk for men. So these are alternatives to marriage, which I call indentured servitude. That's modern marriage today. So I go into two different strategies that men can use to have a exciting, interesting, invigorating, stimulating life, and have their own kids at the same time while minimizing their exposure to the risks of modern indentured servitude known as marriage. And here is the time that these 3 times are different time zones. This is mine lecture will be in the middle one here. This is GMT, Greenwich Mean Time, which is showing noon, which will be 8 p.m. No, that's a.m. That's noon. So that'll be 8 a.m. On Sunday morning, Eastern Standard Time or Atlantic Savings Time, which will be like 5 a.m. Pacific Time. This Sunday, November 15th. So do have a look at it. Once this same lecture will be up on Studio Brûlé sometime after it's presented at the International Conference of Men's Centers as well. So as always, folks, thank you for joining me with Coffee with Steve. And as I like to remind you, do something you love today and every day. And if you don't have something you love, find something you love to do and do it every day. Because no matter how bad things get, this is your life. Get some enjoyment out of it. These are interesting times. So do something you love today. And we'll see you next week. Thanks again for joining me.